Sophia Bennett sat in the dimly lit living room of her small Yorkshire cottage, gazing out the window at the rolling hills beyond. It was a tranquil scene, one that filled her heart with peace. But it wasn't always like this. Her journey to this quiet life had been long, filled with the complexities of human connection, self-doubt, and unexpected revelations. As she sipped from her mug, the warmth of the tea seemed to provide more comfort than the surrounding environment. This was where she had ended up, but the road leading here had been anything but simple. She had grown up in London, a city filled with noise, energy, and constant movement. Her family, while not wealthy, had provided a comfortable life for her. Sophia was the only child of two dedicated professionals. Her mother was a doctor, and her father was an architect. Both were highly respected in their fields, and while they weren't the type to shower her with material gifts, they instilled in her a sense of discipline, responsibility, and, perhaps most importantly, a love for learning. Their expectations were high, and from a young age, Sophia felt a deep sense of pressure to meet those standards. But unlike many children of ambitious parents, Sophia never resented their influence. Instead, she thrived under it, channeling her energy into academics and various extracurricular activities. School was an escape for Sophia. While she had a few friends, she was never part of the in crowd. Instead, she was often the quiet observer, the one who got lost in books or spent afternoons volunteering at animal shelters. From a young age, Sophia had a strong affinity for animals. They didn't judge her, didn't ask anything from her except kindness and care. The companionship of animals was something that offered her solace when she needed it most. Her love for animals deepened throughout her childhood. She could often be found in the local park, watching dogs run around with their owners, longing for that sense of companionship. At home, her parents didn't share her passion, but they never discouraged her either. If anything, their unspoken approval added to her sense of duty toward caring for others, which eventually led her to pursue a career in teaching. She studied literature at university, drawn to the idea of sharing her love for stories with the next generation. After graduation, Sophia decided to leave the bustling streets of London behind. She yearned for a life of peace, away from the frenetic pace of the city. Yorkshire, with its expansive fields and quiet charm, seemed like the perfect escape. She found a small cottage on the edge of a village and decided to start fresh. It wasn't a grand gesture, but it was one that represented her desire for simplicity and a new beginning. She could now focus on her career as a literature teacher while also carving out a life of independence. The transition to her new life was not without challenges. Moving to a small town where everyone knew each other felt a bit isolating at first. But soon, she found comfort in her new surroundings. She loved her job, the way literature allowed her to connect with her students and make them see the world through different lenses. The cottage, though small, became a place of personal solace. She enjoyed decorating each room, putting her own touch on everything, from the antique desk in her study to the simple but elegant curtains in the living room. Yet, despite the external serenity of her life, there was a deep-seated loneliness that Sophia could not shake. The isolation of living alone in a rural area, far from the hustle and bustle of London, was not always easy. She missed the familiar chatter of the city, the casual meetups with friends, and even the anonymity that came with living in a big city. The quiet of the cottage, which once promised peace, now seemed almost suffocating at times. Sophia had always been an introvert, but even she found it difficult to fill the silence of the house with only her thoughts. It was in the midst of this loneliness that Sophia made a decision that would change her life in ways she could not have anticipated. She decided to adopt a dog. Her initial thought was that a pet could be a source of companionship, something to break the monotony of her solitary life. She visited a local shelter and found a young Labrador that had been abandoned. His coat was a rich golden brown, his eyes wide with curiosity, and his tail wagged energetically as she approached. It didn't take long for her to realize that this was the dog she was meant to have. She named him Rocky, after the strength she believed he would bring into her life. Bringing Rocky home was a turning point for Sophia. The house, which had once seemed so empty, now felt alive with energy. Rocky was not just a dog, he became her confidant, her companion, and her source of joy. No longer did she return home to an empty house. There was someone waiting for her, someone who needed her care, attention, and love. Rocky's presence filled the silence in ways Sophia hadn't expected. He followed her from room to room, his bright eyes always looking up at her as if to say, "I'm here with you." Over time, Sophia's bond with Rocky deepened. His playful nature contrasted with her more reserved personality, but somehow, it worked. The evenings that she had once spent alone were now filled with walks in the park, training sessions, and simple moments of affection. There was something deeply comforting about the unconditional love Rocky offered. His affection was not dependent on anything, it was pure, untainted by the complexities of human relationships. As the weeks turned into months, Sophia began to feel less lonely. With Rocky by her side, she discovered a new rhythm to life. She still loved her work, but now, her days had an added sense of purpose. She wasn't just a teacher or a solitary soul wandering through life. She was a caregiver, someone whose actions mattered to another living being. But despite the fulfillment Rocky brought her, there was still a part of Sophia that yearned for something more, a deeper connection, something beyond the bond she shared with her loyal dog. It wasn't until much later that she would meet Max, a man whose presence would challenge everything Sophia thought she understood about love and companionship. Sophia had settled into a rhythm in Yorkshire that felt like a gentle embrace. The quiet of the countryside, with its rolling hills and vast, open skies, brought a sense of calm she had never known in the fast-paced life of London. It wasn't just the landscape that had changed, it was also her internal landscape. She was learning to be alone but not lonely, independent but connected. Her days were filled with teaching literature to her students, whose bright eyes and enthusiastic questions about novels made her feel like she was shaping the future in some small way. And, at night, there was Rocky, whose presence gave Sophia a sense of security, of belonging. Her small cottage, with its creaking wooden floors and cozy corners, felt more like home each day. She found joy in the simplicity of it all, the smell of freshly baked bread wafting from the kitchen, the crackling of the fireplace on cold nights, and the steady rhythm of her life. The time she spent decorating each room with touches of personality and warmth made the house feel like a sanctuary. It wasn't luxurious, but it was hers. The shelves were lined with books, her personal treasures that reflected her academic passions, while the windowsills boasted small potted plants, evidence of her growing fondness for nurturing life in every form. Yet, despite the peacefulness of her surroundings, Sophia couldn't escape the nagging feeling that something was missing. She had everything, an established career, a lovely home, and a loyal companion in Rocky, but there was still a yearning inside her. She didn't know what exactly she was seeking, but she felt a restless ache, a desire for connection beyond what she had with her dog. As much as Rocky filled her heart with joy, she couldn't ignore the fact that he wasn't human. And there were nights when she longed for deeper companionship, someone with whom she could share not just the silence but the small, intimate moments of life. It was during one of these lonely evenings that her life took an unexpected turn. Sophia's car had been acting up for weeks, the engine sputtering and the brakes making a strange noise. It had been a nuisance, but she kept putting off going to the mechanic, too busy with work and life to address it. However, on a rainy afternoon, the car finally gave out. She found herself stranded on the side of the road, the rain pouring down in sheets, her phone dead, and no way to call for help. It was then that Max appeared. He was a mechanic, tall and broad-shouldered, with hands stained by years of working with engines. His face was weathered, but his eyes were kind. Max had been driving by when he noticed Sophia's car, pulled over without hesitation, and offered to help. At first, Sophia had been skeptical. Her car was always finicky, and she had dealt with enough mechanics to know that many saw a woman in distress as an opportunity to overcharge. But Max was different. His calm demeanor, combined with a genuine willingness to help, immediately put her at ease. "Looks like it's just the alternator," Max said as he crouched next to the engine, his hands working efficiently, his brow furrowed in concentration. "I can fix it, but it'll take a bit." Sophia watched as he worked, impressed by his expertise. There was something about his presence that made her feel safe, something unspoken but real. She stood back, holding her umbrella, grateful that someone had come along to help. And as she watched him work, a feeling stirred within her, something she hadn't expected. Max didn't say much as he worked. He focused on the car, making small comments about the problem here and there, but mostly, he allowed the silence to fill the air. It wasn't uncomfortable silence, though. It was the kind of silence that only exists when two people are content in each other's company, when no words are necessary to understand each other. As he finished the repair, he wiped his hands on a rag and looked up at her, a small smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "Good as new," he said, his voice low and steady. Sophia felt a wave of relief rush over her. The rain had slowed, but she still found herself standing there, not wanting to leave just yet. Max's presence was comforting, and she realized that she hadn't felt that kind of peace with anyone in a long time. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice almost lost in the fading sound of rain. "No problem," Max replied, and for a moment, their eyes locked. Sophia noticed the kindness in his gaze, and it was something that felt new, something that stirred an unfamiliar warmth in her chest. As they exchanged pleasantries, Max offered her a ride back to town, but Sophia, feeling the need for a bit of solitude to process the unexpected encounter, politely declined. But that wasn't the last time they saw each other. Over the next few weeks, they crossed paths in the small town several times. Max's garage was located just on the outskirts, and it seemed that fate kept bringing them together. What began as casual exchanges soon turned into conversations that lingered longer than either of them expected. Max would stop by her cottage on occasion, dropping off a spare part or checking in on something related to her car. Each time, their connection deepened. Sophia found herself looking forward to their interactions, to the way he listened when she spoke and the warmth of his smile. He wasn't like anyone she had ever known, there was no pretense, no expectations, just a genuine kindness that drew her in. Max had a simplicity to him that Sophia found refreshing. He wasn't looking for anything from her except the same authentic connection that she longed for. He wasn't pushing for her to open up, but somehow, she found herself sharing more than she ever intended to. About her childhood, her career, and, of course, her loneliness. And as she spoke, Max listened with a kind of quiet understanding that made her feel safe. For the first time in a long while, Sophia allowed herself to be vulnerable. Over time, their friendship blossomed into something more. They went on walks together, shared quiet dinners at the small local pub, and slowly, without either of them realizing it, they became a part of each other's lives. Max, with his unassuming charm, became her rock, and for the first time in years, Sophia felt like she had found a place to truly belong. As winter began to settle in over Yorkshire, bringing with it the crisp air and early sunsets, Max asked Sophia out on a proper date. It wasn't extravagant, just a cozy dinner at a small restaurant, but it felt significant. And as they sat across from each other, sharing stories and laughter, Sophia realized that she was falling for him. It was a quiet, simple romance, but it was exactly what she needed. For the first time in her life, Sophia felt like she had found someone who truly understood her. Someone who made her feel seen, heard, and cherished. She wasn't alone anymore. But little did she know, the relationship with Max would soon lead her down a path that would force her to confront some of the darkest parts of her past, and it would challenge everything she thought she knew about love, loyalty, and forgiveness. The months following their first real date together were a whirlwind of quiet intimacy, shared experiences, and the kind of growing connection that made Sophia's heart feel full in a way it never had before. Max was different from anyone she had ever known. He didn't rush her into anything, didn't make her feel pressured to reveal all of herself at once. Instead, he was patient, letting their relationship unfold at its own pace. Their bond deepened effortlessly, as if they were two puzzle pieces that had been waiting to fit together all along. Max had a kind of warmth that Sophia had longed for but never fully understood until she experienced it firsthand. He was unassuming, with a grounded nature that made her feel calm. There was no need for grand gestures or elaborate promises. His consistency, his loyalty, and his presence were more than enough. They spent weekends exploring the nearby countryside, hiking through the dense forests, and discovering the small cafes tucked away in corners of Yorkshire she hadn't known existed. At night, they would watch films in the comfort of her cottage, wrapped in blankets, laughing over shared jokes, and talking late into the night about everything and nothing. In Max, Sophia found a sense of ease she had never felt in a relationship before. Unlike her previous experiences, where love had been tangled in complexities and uncertainties, what she had with Max was pure and simple. It was honest. Max was the kind of person who listened, really listened, and Sophia found herself opening up to him in ways she hadn't with anyone else. She shared stories of her childhood, her dreams for the future, and, more vulnerably, her fears. The sense of self-doubt and loneliness that had shadowed her for so long seemed to melt away when she was with him. Yet, as their relationship grew stronger, there was an unsettling feeling that Sophia couldn't quite shake. It was a gnawing unease that had been building for months. It wasn't about Max, he was perfect, or so it seemed, but about her. There was something she had buried deep within herself, something she hadn't fully confronted, and she was beginning to realize it would eventually come to the surface. No matter how much she tried to ignore it, the weight of her past kept pressing in, reminding her that no matter how much she loved Max, there were shadows in her history that still haunted her. Sophia had always been good at keeping secrets, at locking away pieces of herself that she wasn't ready to face. And for a long time, she had convinced herself that she was fine, that the past was the past, and that she had moved on. But as she spent more time with Max, her feelings of guilt resurfaced, reminding her of an earlier chapter in her life, a chapter she had hoped would remain buried forever. Before meeting Max, there had been Rocky. And with Rocky there had been an intimacy that Sophia had never expected. It had started innocently enough. Rocky had been her companion, her friend, and over time, their bond had deepened. But it wasn't just the bond of a pet and its owner, it had become something more, something complicated and confusing. At first, it was just an overwhelming sense of comfort. Rocky was always there for her, always willing to listen in silence. But over time, Sophia found herself leaning on him in ways she hadn't anticipated. She found solace in his presence when loneliness consumed her, and she became increasingly reliant on him to fill the emotional void that seemed to exist within her. The deeper her connection with Rocky grew, the more she began to question her own emotional boundaries. What had started as a simple companionship had become an intense attachment, one that Sophia knew wasn't entirely healthy, but one she couldn't bring herself to fully break. It wasn't that she was romantically in love with her dog, but there was an emotional dependency that she couldn't deny. Rocky was the one constant in her life, the one who never judged her, never asked for more than she could give. And when she felt the weight of her own insecurities and regrets, it was Rocky's presence that made her feel grounded. But as her relationship with Max blossomed, Sophia found herself standing at a crossroads. The bond with Rocky, while providing her comfort, also created a sense of shame that she could no longer ignore. The guilt she had buried deep within her for so long started to eat away at her, and with each passing day, it became harder to reconcile the woman she was becoming with the choices she had made in the past. Sophia didn't know how to explain it to Max. How could she? How could she tell him about the guilt that had been haunting her since her time with Rocky? It wasn't something she had ever confessed to anyone, not her friends, not her family, and certainly not Max. The thought of him knowing made her stomach churn with embarrassment. What would he think of her? Would he still see her as the woman he loved, or would he see her as someone broken, someone incapable of truly loving? One afternoon, as Sophia and Max sat together on the couch in her cottage, the weight of her thoughts became unbearable. The peaceful quiet of the room felt suffocating, the soft ticking of the clock on the mantelpiece growing louder with every passing second. Max, oblivious to the turmoil brewing inside her, was focused on the book he had brought with him. But Sophia's mind was miles away, lost in the storm of her thoughts. "Max," she said suddenly, her voice barely above a whisper. He looked up from his book, his brow furrowing slightly at the unusual tone in her voice. "What's wrong?" he asked, setting the book aside. There was a softness in his voice, an unspoken understanding that made Sophia feel both safe and terrified at the same time. "I need to tell you something," she said, her throat tightening. She felt the words sit heavily in her chest, as if they had been waiting for the right moment to escape. But now that she was here, standing on the precipice of confession, she wasn't sure if she could do it. The vulnerability she felt was almost too much to bear. Max didn't say anything. Instead, he reached for her hand and held it in his. His touch was warm, grounding her in the present moment. It was as if he was silently telling her that whatever it was, they would face it together. Sophia took a deep breath, feeling the air fill her lungs, and finally, the words came tumbling out. I've made mistakes, Max, things I've never told anyone. Things I'm not proud of. And I need you to know about them, before we go any further." Max's expression didn't change, but his grip on her hand tightened. "You can tell me anything, Sophia. I'm not going anywhere." And with those words, the floodgates opened. Sophia began to speak, slowly at first, her voice shaking with the weight of her confession. She told him about her time with Rocky, about the emotional attachment that had become something darker than she had intended. She explained the guilt, the shame, and the overwhelming sense of unworthiness she had carried with her for so long. When she finished, there was a long silence between them. Sophia's heart raced, her mind swirling with fear and regret. She wasn't sure what Max would say, but she feared that whatever it was, it would be the end of everything they had built together. But Max didn't say anything for a while. Instead, he pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly against his chest. The quiet embrace was enough to silence the storm inside her. And for the first time in a long while, Sophia allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she could be forgiven. The silence between Sophia and Max hung thick in the air, but it wasn't an uncomfortable silence. It was the kind of silence that comes after a difficult confession, when both people are left with the gravity of the words that have just been spoken. Sophia sat there, wrapped in Max's arms, feeling his warmth but also the weight of her own shame. She wasn't sure what to expect from him. She had anticipated rejection, even anger, but not this calm, unspoken understanding. Max hadn't judged her, he hadn't recoiled. Instead, he simply held her, as if he understood that the process of confronting her past wasn't about seeking absolution, but about facing the truth. "I'm so sorry, Max," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I never wanted to hurt you. I never meant for any of this to happen." Max didn't respond immediately. He continued to hold her close, his hand gently rubbing her back. His silence, far from being an expression of disappointment, was a testament to the depth of his love and patience. After what felt like an eternity, he finally spoke, his voice steady and soothing. "Sophia," he began, his words soft but firm. "I'm not angry with you. You've been carrying this burden for a long time, and I know it wasn't easy for you to share. But I want you to understand something. We all have our pasts. We all have our mistakes. What matters is not the things we've done, but how we learn from them and how we choose to move forward. I'm here for you. And I'm not going anywhere." Sophia's breath caught in her throat. His words were like a balm to the raw, open wound inside her. For the first time in years, she felt seen, truly seen, not for the mistakes she had made, but for the person she was striving to become. Max's unconditional acceptance gave her something she hadn't thought possible: hope. "I don't deserve you," she said quietly, pulling back slightly to look into his eyes. "You're so good to me, and I've been carrying this guilt, this secret. I've made mistakes that I'm ashamed of, and I don't know if I can forgive myself." Max looked at her with an unwavering sincerity. "Sophia, you don't have to forgive yourself all at once. Healing takes time. But I'll be here, every step of the way, if you need me. And I believe in you. I believe in us." His words resonated deep within her, like a lifeline thrown to someone drowning in their own remorse. For a moment, she felt a shift within herself, a glimmer of peace breaking through the cloud of guilt that had overshadowed her life for so long. As the days passed, Sophia found herself starting to let go of the shame that had defined so much of her existence. It wasn't easy. The guilt still surfaced from time to time, usually when she least expected it. But now, when those thoughts crept in, she could feel Max's presence beside her, his steady support reminding her that she didn't have to carry this weight alone. The healing process was slow, but it was happening, and she could finally begin to imagine a future without the constant burden of her past. With Max by her side, Sophia was able to focus on the things that truly mattered. She began to rebuild her sense of self-worth, not based on her mistakes, but on the person she was becoming. She poured herself into her teaching, finding joy and fulfillment in the way her students responded to her lessons. There were days when she would take long walks through the Yorkshire countryside with Max and Rocky, the three of them enjoying the simplicity of nature and the quiet connection they shared. Max's unconditional love and understanding had given Sophia something she had never known: the space to heal. He never pushed her to be something she wasn't, he simply loved her for who she was, flaws and all. And for the first time in her life, Sophia began to understand that love wasn't about perfection. It wasn't about being free from mistakes, it was about accepting each other, accepting oneself, and growing together. As their relationship continued to flourish, Sophia found herself thinking more about the future. She had always been cautious, unsure of what was possible after everything she had been through. But with Max, she began to feel a sense of possibility she had never imagined. They talked about marriage, about building a life together, and even about children. The thought of it no longer terrified her. With Max, she felt ready to embrace the future, no matter what it held. One evening, as they sat on the porch of their cottage, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold, Max turned to Sophia with a gentle smile. "I've been thinking," he said, his voice soft but full of meaning. "We've been through a lot together, haven't we?" Sophia nodded, her heart swelling with gratitude. We have. And I'm so glad we've had each other. Max reached out and took her hand, his fingers warm and steady. I don't want to spend another day without you, Sophia. I want to build a future with you, no matter what comes our way. I love you, and I want us to be together, always. Tears welled up in Sophia's eyes as she looked at him. She had never imagined that she would find this kind of love after all the struggles and mistakes of her past. But here it was, this simple, beautiful love that was all-encompassing and accepting. It was a love that made her believe that, despite everything, she could be whole again. I love you too, Max, she said, her voice thick with emotion. And I want that too. I want to build a life with you. Together. And so, with that declaration, Sophia felt the weight of her past begin to lift, little by little. She was no longer bound by the mistakes she had made or the guilt that had once consumed her. Instead, she was embracing the future with someone who accepted her, who believed in her, and who loved her unconditionally. The journey wasn't easy, and there would be more challenges ahead. But for the first time in a long while, Sophia felt ready to face them, knowing that no matter what happened, she had a partner who would stand by her side. Together, they would navigate the ups and downs of life, building a future grounded in love, trust, and understanding. As Sophia looked out at the horizon, the fading sunlight casting a warm glow over the land, she realized that she had found something far more valuable than she ever thought possible. It wasn't perfection. It wasn't without mistakes or regrets. It was redemption, a second chance to rewrite her story, and with Max by her side, she knew that she was finally where she was meant to be. And so, the journey of healing, love, and growth continued, as Sophia and Max walked hand in hand toward a future filled with promise, knowing that they had weathered the storm together and emerged stronger than before. Their love was a testament to the power of forgiveness, not just of others, but of oneself. And in that, they found the greatest gift of all, peace.